At the moment of conception, the soul makes contact with the physical world for the first time. It's probably more dramatic and more traumatic than birth. And birth is pretty traumatic. So King David HaMelech says, "My father and mother abandoned me, but God gathered me in." What does he mean, my mother and father abandoned me? He's talking about the moment of conception. Because a tzaddik, a really holy soul, doesn't forget anything. So he remembered being told in heaven that he's going to be born, that he's going to live 70 years, that he's going to be a king. He also remembers the moment of conception. What is happening at the moment of conception? The mother and the father are sleeping. And this tiny little baby is going through a very scary experience. So David HaMelech says, I was being conceived, and I looked around to see who's in charge. Who's taking care? Who's babysitting? Mother is sleeping, the father is sleeping, all alone. But then he realized God is there making sure everything happens. So when my mother and father abandoned me, they fell asleep. God was there to take care of me. So that is the first contact of a soul with the physical world. There isn't much of a body, but it's physical. 40 days after conception, the body becomes real. At 3 months, the body is pretty much recognizable. Looks like a body. It has the features of a body. The soul is settling in to parts of the body. The mind goes into the brain. The hearing goes into the ears. It's settling in. You can't rush it because it would be too shocking. So it happens gradually, slowly, in stages. So the moment of conception, 40 days, 3 months, then 5th month is a whole new stage of connection. And then, of course, at birth. And again, David HaMelech says, when I went through the valley of the shadow of death, I was not afraid because God was with me. What is the valley of the shadow of death? Birth. It's a valley because you're going from a wonderful life inside the womb to a okay life outside the womb. And in between is a valley. A dangerous moment when you have to shift to start breathing on your own. So again, it's a very shocking, scary time. What helps the baby survive it? God is there. And that's why a person who goes through a near-death experience starts to believe in God. What's the connection? A near-death experience is very similar to being born. In fact, being born is a near-death experience. And what happens in that experience? You see God is there, and it comforts you. So when a person goes through a near-death experience, he feels the shock of birth, and he feels God's comforting presence. "30 days after birth, the child is completely, what is the word? Viable. Then comes the bar mitzvah, or the bas mitzvah, and the soul has completely settled into the body. That's the coming, the entering life. The same thing happens in reverse. At the end of life, it doesn't happen suddenly. Stages. First of all, most people know about 40 days before they pass away, they know it's starting to happen. They have a feeling, so that it doesn't come as a big shock. My mother, Aleha Shalom, passed away 2 years ago, 101, from the Ukraine. Everyone from the Ukraine lives to be 100. No. I don't know why. They're stubborn, I guess. I don't know. So a week before, the doctor came to see her, and she said to the doctor in Yiddish, "Nu, doctor, kann noch leben? Can I live some more?" And the doctor said, "You can live as long as you want." She said, "Oh, okay." And a week later, she passed away. She knew it was happening, and she was talking about it. The experts say that it's very scary. The moment of death is very scary. But they're not Jewish. Those experts are not Jewish. For a Jew, it's not so scary.
Not so scary for Christians.
No. Huh?
It's not scary for Christians.
For religious Christians.
Yes.
But for Jews, all Jews, it's not so scary. I'll tell you why. So first of all, it happens in stages. First, you get a sense, something is happening. You have time to adjust. The moment when the soul leaves and you stop breathing, it doesn't go very far. The soul leaves the body but stays in the room. Doesn't want to go away so fast. So for 7 days, the soul remains attached to the body. Not in the body, but attached to the body. And it really doesn't want to leave. That's why we have 7 days of Shiva. Not because we are sad, but because we are feeling what the soul is feeling. And as long as the soul is in pain, we don't go back to business as usual. You can't leave a soul in pain. So the first 3 days, most painful. Not scary. Painful, because you don't want to go. So the first 3 days, the change is painful. The next 4 days of the Shiva, not so painful. And that's why the first 3 days of Shiva, you really shouldn't be doing anything, business as usual. The last 4 days, you can do some things, because the soul is not so troubled. By the end of 7 days, the soul has made peace with the fact that it's not in a body anymore. That's why, as far as the soul is concerned, you should stop sitting Shiva. You can still be sad for yourself, but Shiva is finished because the soul doesn't need your sympathy or your presence because it's now comfortable. 30 days later, it settles into heaven much more comfortable than at the end of the 7 days. And then for 12 months, maximum, it goes through the transition. It's a bisalach. It forgets a little bit about the pleasures of this life and gets used to the pleasures of heaven. That adjustment is called Gehenna, which Christians call hell. And they're terrified of it. But we are not, because we know that that's just the path to heaven. The path to heaven is a little painful, because it's such a great change. So just like the baby being born goes through contractions, the soul leaving the body also goes through contractions, because adjustments are hard. But the soul knows this is just the path to heaven. Now, what happens in heaven? The soul remembers everything, because it remains a soul. It doesn't just become energy or an angel. It remains itself, its personality, its memories, its experiences, and mostly its relatives. Mishpacha. It remains interested and concerned for its children, for its grandchildren. It forgets nothing. Because while we're alive, it's not the body that feels and hears and sees. It's the neshama through the body. But when the soul leaves the body, it hears better, it sees better, it feels more, because it's not limited by the body. So, does your grandmother know that you're sitting here right now? Of course she knows. But she has something else to do in heaven. What, is she going shopping? She looks at this world and is interested what her future has turned out to be. It's her future. Of course she's interested. And your grandfather? You're his future. Of course he's interested. So he pays attention, he knows, he hears, he sees. He doesn't have access. But he's certainly worried about you, concerned for you, davening for you. That's why when we say Kaddish, it means so much to them. Yizkor is so exciting for them that they come to shul. During Yizkor, those souls come down to shul. Not easy. But they want to be there. In fact, they drag you to shul. Ever wonder why Jews go to Yizkor, they don't go to anything else? Because they're not religious? But Yizkor they go. Because your father, your mother, your grandfather, your grandmother is not going to take no for an answer. You're going to come to shul for Yizkor. And they drag you there. And they meet you there. So the soul is very real. It's very much alive. It does not die. So what does death mean? Death means your life moves away. So what dies? Nothing really. The body was never really alive. It was just living off the soul. And a soul doesn't die, it can't. It's life. So nothing really dies, but the body and the soul are separated. That's why we are not so scared. There's another reason we're not scared. Everybody knows that life is temporary. But they think death is permanent. Nicht emes. Death is temporary. Because once God creates somebody, He'll never give up on him. So what does it mean? He creates you for 100 years and then not interested? No. Death is temporary. The soul is waiting in heaven to come back into its body. So in some way, every soul who has been dead already 1,000 years never gives up on its body. It wants to come back. Its body. And that's what's called Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. God promises the soul goes to heaven and is rewarded for all the good that it did. And what about the body? When will the body be rewarded? Because you know you can't do good without a body. So it's not fair, it's not right that the soul should be rewarded and the body not. So the Gemara tells an interesting story. There were two guys in ancient Israel. One of them was blind, and the other one was lame. But they were hungry, and they wanted to pick some fruits from an orchard that was enclosed by a wall. They wanted to steal fruit. The blind guy, Nebuch, he can't see. The lame guy can't reach. So what did they do? The blind guy put the lame guy on his shoulders, and he was able to reach the fruit, and that's how they stole the fruit. They were caught and brought to the king. And the king is thinking, who should I punish? The blind guy or the lame guy? And he realized both of them are incapable of stealing by themselves. The blind guy couldn't do it without the lame guy, and the lame guy couldn't do it without the blind guy. So they both have to be punished. But he decided that the best way to do it is to punish them the way they committed the crime. So he put the blind guy on the bottom, he put the lame guy on his shoulders, and punished them together. So the Gemara says, this is also true of the soul and the body. When you do a mitzvah, without the soul, the body can't do anything. Without the body, the soul can't do a mitzvah. The soul can't light a Shabbos candle. The soul cannot make a bracha. The soul can't put a coin into a pushka. So it's got to be the body with the soul. So God says, how do I reward them? I'm going to have to put them back together again. The way they did the mitzvah, that's how I'm going to reward them. So every soul is going to come back to its body. and the body will come back alive. So some philosopher asked one of the rabbis of the Gemara, "You really think a dead body can come alive? That doesn't make sense." So the rabbi said, "A body that was never born can be born? So a body that was born already once, what's the chachma to do it again?" So the big miracle is when a body is born for the first time. To come back is not such a big miracle already. So yes, the body comes back. Interestingly, it comes back in exactly the shape and condition as it was when it died. Why? Because it's a reverse process. It's like running a film backwards. Also, you got to come back the way people remember you, or they won't recognize you. So you come back looking the way you looked when you passed away. And then you continue to heal until your body is 20 years old. And you stay that way forever. How do we know 20 years old? Adam and Chava, when they were created, the first day of their life, they weren't a fetus. They weren't babies. What did they look like? A 20-year-old. That's the shape, the form, the health of a body that is in perfect condition. So when the body is resurrected after the coming of Mashiach, it will look like a 20-year-old. But it'll move backwards from the old age till it becomes a 20-year-old, and that's how it will stay. This is why we're not afraid. This is why we have such respect for the souls in heaven. We know they're listening and that it matters to them. Every time you do a mitzvah, they walk around saying, "That's my granddaughter. You see that? That's my kid." They take credit for everything good we do. That's also why we have all the mitzvahs relating to the body when it passes away, the respect for the body, because we know it's coming back. So we're very careful. We treat it with great respect. We don't leave it alone before the burial. It's never alone for a minute. We wash it, we clean it, getting ready for the coming back. And that's why we don't do cremations, especially now, 75 years since the Holocaust, when the bodies were so mistreated. So we're very respectful of the body because we never give up on the body. Even the body that has been dead for 1,000 years, its soul is waiting to come back to its body. That's also why it's so unforgivable when people desecrate a cemetery. You would think, what's the big deal? The body is not feeling anything. The body is not insulted. Why are we so careful with? Because death is temporary. You're talking about a body that's going to come back. And when it comes back, it's going to be perfect. So we treat it with respect. It's a mitzvah to honor your body. Because without the body, you can't do a mitzvah. So that is the brief version, summary of how life comes and how life goes. It's not that strange. It's not that scary. But it is very exciting. Both are exciting. Coming and going, and then coming back. Life never ends. It can't. How can life die? Like, how can salt go bad? It can't. And we need to know this. We need to know this. And we need to teach our children and our grandchildren. They need to know this too. I heard a really impressive concept. Very, very true. It goes like this. If you raise your children, then you can spoil your grandchildren. Spoil your grandchildren. But if you spoil your children, you're going to have to raise your grandchildren. Isn't that brilliant? That's the whole story of life right there. In one sentence, it tells you everything. Sometimes you have to raise your grandchildren from heaven. That's hard. If the children were spoiled, then somebody is going to have to raise the grandchildren. Because the parents can't. They were spoiled. So the grandparents have to become the parents, even if they're in heaven. So what do you think? Makes sense? It's understandable. Yeah.
When your Mashiach returns, will there be a rush of souls coming back at that time?
You mean bodies coming back?
Yes.
That's
returning.
The scary part is the body. Those who are needed the most will come back first. Like the teachers, Moshe Rabbeinu.
Rabbis.
The great rabbis.
Hillel.
All the rabbis would be too much.
Hillel.
Yeah. The rabbis who are needed the most will come back first, and gradually everyone will return and live in a very holy world.
That's what my next question would be. How would it look, what would it look like when Mashiach comes, the souls return to their bodies? What would the world look like?
Well, let's start with the best news of all. We won't have to work.
Okay.
This whole fact of life, you got to get a job. You got to make some money. You got to earn a living. That's got to stop.
Good.
Takes up too much time. It's a full-time job. We have no time for that. The reason we have to work for a living is because they ate from the tree of knowledge. Had they not eaten from the tree of knowledge, work would never have been necessary, because everything we needed grew on trees. We didn't need money, so money doesn't grow on trees.
And conception.
If they hadn't eaten, they would never have died. So we're going back to that reality. The first reality. The first reality was every body is like a 20-year-old and never gets old.
And there isn't pain in childbirth.
And there's no pain in childbirth because you have a baby in an hour. So Adam and Eve lived to be 930. How many children did they have?
930. Like the sky, like the stars in the sky.
So imagine if they hadn't eaten from the tree, they would have a child every hour.
Oh, yeah, boy.
But that's okay, because they don't have to work. They don't have to pay the bills. So there will be no pain. There will be no need to work. There will be no death. There will be no evil. What are we going to do all day? So I actually heard a scientist on the radio years ago. They were talking about using solar energy instead of oil for heat, for energy. He says, if we do this right, solar energy will be free. It won't cost anything. That means you can run a factory for free. You can fly a plane for free. If that happens, how much will it cost to fly to California? You'll have to pay for the peanuts.
Pay for what?
For the peanuts. And even that'll be free because it grows on trees. So he says, get ready. When the solar energy becomes available, you won't have to go to work. So I'm suggesting, he said, and this is a scientist, not a rabbi, he said, I'm suggesting get a library card. You're going to have a lot of free time. You'll be able to read a lot. That's what's happening. And it doesn't look like a miracle anymore. It looks like nature is moving in that direction. Solar energy can be used. It's not a miracle. Oil, batteries in cars, not so good. So, without any miracle, we're eventually going to be using solar energy.
What is the miracle?
The miracle is we will be excited about life even though there will be no problems. How do we know God is a him?
He's so much bigger than male, female. So much bigger.
You mean he's the third gender?
No, he is Yahweh.
I'll tell you why we say God is a him. Because our relationship is like a marriage. So
Yes,
if God is a she, then we would have to be the he.
That's okay.
doesn't matter.
When humans think that they are the husband and God is the wife, it's been tried, we become too violent.
Yes.
We became what?
Violent. We feel like we have to protect God.
No.
So it's much better he should be the he, we will be the she.
If that is the way.
Much better.
Gender is nothing to God.
It's only relative
It's
to the relationship, right?
Is there any recognition of souls?
Today, we don't see souls. We know, we feel our soul, but we don't see it. We even recognize our soul mate without actually seeing the soul. But we feel it. The truth is that with modern science, most of the important things in our life we don't see. We don't see atoms, we don't see germs, we don't see electricity, we don't see gravity. They're very real. If you can't see it, doesn't mean it's not there. In fact, the things that we do see, we're not so sure about. The things that we know for sure are things we don't see. If a man says to his wife, "I love you very much," I don't see it. That makes it more real, not less real. So we're living in a very exciting time, and particularly this year. Can anyone in the world predict what's going to happen this year? Politically? The world is so unstable. Nothing is for sure.
But God reigns.
You can't predict anything this year. Who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? We don't even know anymore. So this year, the only thing you can be sure of is that you can expect nothing. Everything is going to be a surprise. The things we thought we knew for sure, not so sure. The things we thought we would never see, like peace, is going to happen. So expect the unexpected. Because this is a year of unexpected goodness. A lot of things are changing for the better. You don't know this by reading the newspapers. The news is all bad, but it's not true. It's not true. Like somebody said, the newspapers, half of what you read in the newspapers is a lie, and the other half is just not true. So if you want to know what's really happening in the world, the only way to measure progress are people becoming better. If people are becoming better, the world is becoming good. And people are becoming better. Of course, that doesn't make the headlines. There is less hunger in the world than ever before. There is an intolerance to war never existed before.
Rabbi, what do you say about the increase of anti-Semitism? It's increasing markedly now. Do you think the world is a better place because anti-Semitism is increasing?
The question is, what about the increase of anti-Semitism? Again, the headlines give a very bad impression. We hear of every incident anywhere in the world. Well, we never got that kind of news before. We don't hear about all the Jews who are protected, who are blessed, who are supported by non-Jews. The love of Israel that non-Jews have, it's awesome, but you never hear about it. Let me tell you a quick story.
I didn't hear that.
Let me tell you a story. I live in Minnesota, and Minnesota is a religious state. The big seminary that produces Lutheran ministers is in Minnesota, and another large seminary that produces Baptists is in Minnesota.
Yes.
I've been there 50 years. About 40 years ago, I was invited to speak to their graduating class, both seminaries, the Baptists and the Lutherans. So every year, I visit, speak to the graduating class. It's always very nice. They're polite, they're respectful, they really want to know what Judaism says. One year, I come to the event. There are about 200 graduating ministers in an auditorium. And the teacher, the minister, every year when I come, he assures me the students have been prepared. And I ask him, what do you mean? How did they prepare? He says, they know that they shouldn't try to convert you. I said, it's okay, don't worry about it. No, they've been prepared. Okay. This year that I showed up, I'm speaking, and I notice a woman sitting right in front. You know, it's like a slanted room, an auditorium, you know. Right in front, this woman is sitting there with that intense look. I spoke for about 40 minutes. She didn't blink once. And I thought, oh, she was not prepared. She must have missed that class. I thought, okay, this is going to be trouble. Sure enough, as soon as I finish speaking, her hand goes up. Now, she's sitting at the bottom, you know, so I'm looking over at the top rows, hoping somebody there will raise their hand, because I don't want to hear what she has to say. Nobody else raises their hand. And everybody in the room can see that her hand is up. I had no choice. So I call on her. She says, what do you think of Christians? My first thought was, this is how pogroms get started. So I try to lighten it up. I say, well, would you like my honest answer or my more polite answer? She doesn't smile. Your honest answer. I figured, okay, here goes. I don't know what the reaction is going to be, but I'm going to give him an honest answer. I said, the truth is, when I hear the word Christian, it scares me. Because you haven't always been good to Jews. And I'm waiting for the room to explode. Nothing. Somebody else raised their hand, went on to the next question, had a nice conversation. After it's all over, I'm standing in one side of the room speaking to some of the students. The teacher, the minister, comes over and says, Have you got a minute? Kathy wants to say something to you. Takes me to the other side of the room. Kathy is that woman in the front. She's sitting at one of the desks, and she is sobbing. And the minister says, "Tell him." She can't speak. She's hysterical. He says, "Come on, Kathy, tell him." And I'm thinking, tell me what? She crying because I insulted her? She calms down and she says, "I want to apologize for all the horrible things we have done in the name of God. Your answer was way too kind." So it turns out that that intense look was not that she wanted to convert me. She felt so ashamed to be sitting in front of a Jew, knowing what Christianity's history, right? So when she asked, "What do you think of Christians?" she was expecting a much more critical answer. She says, "Your answer was way too kind." The amazing thing is, the teacher knew that that's what she wanted to say, and he pushed her to say it. Which means the whole class agrees. Something is really changing. My grandfather, was not that long ago, my grandfather in Poland on Christmas night spent the night in a cellar with all the other Jews because it was too dangerous to stay in the house. This is not ancient history. And now, this grandfather's grandson is told by a Christian seminary, "We were terrible, I'm so ashamed." Something's changing.
Some of us have always thought that. By being a Christian,
See, that's why
ashamed of what has happened to you.
That's why I wasn't so surprised that she said it as an individual, but that it's the class public opinion.
Yes,
This is something new.
not necessarily. There have been many of us all through our lives who have been very sorrowful as to what has happened to our brothers and sisters.
That is good news.
It is good news, but it always has been so. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. And there are many of us that,
So what needs to change is that the other wheels
that's right.
have to make the news.
We have to get it going.
The unsqueaky wheel.
That's right. We are made by the Creator of the universe, all of us.
So on the Hebrew calendar, this is the year 5,780. 5,780, which means we're almost at the 6,000th year. History is a reflection of the 6 days of creation. Each day of creation is 1,000 years. And the millennium, the 1,000 years, matches what happened on that day of creation. From the year 5,000, Friday began. Because Friday is the 6th day. So when does the 6th day begin? At the year 5,000. Because 5,001 is already into the 6th day. So the year 5,000 on our calendar is the beginning of Friday. The morning, Friday begins Thursday night, right? The day begins the night before. So the 12 hours of darkness is from the year 5000 to the year 5500. That's half the day. So the year 5500 is Friday morning, daylight. Now, if you take 250 years, which is a half a day, half of the day, you get 5,750. So the year 5,750 is Friday afternoon.
Close.
Now we're in the year 5,780, which means it's Erev Shabbos. Officially, we can already light Shabbos candles. Because we always bring Shabbos in early. We light Shabbos candles 18 minutes before sunset. But Shabbos doesn't technically begin until nightfall. Not even at sunset, when the stars come out. So not only do we light candles at sunset, we do it 18 minutes before sunset. So we're adding holiness, part of a weekday, we're making it into Shabbos. The same is true historically. In the year 5780, we can start Shabbos. What is Shabbos? The coming of Mashiach. The day of rest, when we won't have to work anymore. So it's an exciting, dramatic year. So stay tuned for news. Good news. Somebody just spoke to me last week about writing a will. Says, is it a good idea to write a will, or is it a little morbid?
It's a good idea.
I said, it's a very good idea, but don't take it seriously. You're not dying. It's over. It's been done. It's not exciting. Death is going to stop. So don't take it so serious. Sounds ridiculous? Well, this is the year for ridiculous. Things are going to happen that we never expected. Good things. Medically, politically, on every level. It's going to be a lot better than we can imagine. People are saying, what about anti-Semitism? We have to fight anti-Semitism. Never again. This time we're going to fight back. The police will fight back. We are going to be proud Jews